Welcome to Saving Throws, the only podcast that thinks Curse of Strahd should be run like The Bachelor. I'm Ali, and I found the sword in the stone, but immediately put it back as I could not handle that much responsibility.
I'm Harry. I taught a beholder how to hopscotch yesterday.
I'm Kingsley, and I'm your neighborhood-friendly lad of the lake.
Uh, we are Saving Throws, and we have a very special guest, the author of Camelots Reckoning. Caleb Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Caleb Kelly, author of the Camelots Reckoning. Glad to be on.
Yeah,
Glad
good to
to
have you,
have
man.
It is a pleasure.
Happy to have you.
For, unfortunately, but also very fortunately, not the first time ever. We already recorded this podcast and had a lovely time doing so, but unfortunately the gods of chaos deigned that it was too powerful a podcast to release, and Caleb's energy that he brought to it was so powerful that the audio had to be destroyed forever. So here we are again, re-recording this episode.
Which is funnily enough, as it was a great podcast. Unfortunately, that is now only will live in our memories. But it was a great podcast, and we said to Caleb after it we would love to have him another time, and he was happy to come back on. We did not think the other time we would get him on to be as soon as 4 days later to record this, 2 days before it's actually meant to air, because we usually do it in a week in advance. But we are scrambling, and luckily Caleb was nice enough to come back on so we could re-record this podcast.
Yes, very fun.
So as you guys know, we're avid fans of all things geeky and nerdy, including, not withholding, fantasy, sci-fi, and all sorts of novels. As we said before, Caleb Kelly is the author of the Camelot Reckoning book, the first in the Viperus Primus saga. Or is it Primus Viperus?
Yeah.
Primus Viperus?
Yep.
Lovely. Caleb, do you want to tell us a little bit about the book?
Sure. So the book is about twins Oliver and Roland Lockhart. They live in their normal lives. One is an archaeologist, the other is a lawyer, and after some pretty unfortunate events happen, they decide to kind of relive their childhood, which was full of pretending to be knights and slaying dragons and rescuing damsels. And they attempt to go and find what they believe is the real sword in the stone Excalibur. And it just so happens they are not as wrong about it as they thought they were. And
Yeah.
the book kind of stumbles into what happens when they find the actual sword.
Yeah, it's that lovely
Love
blend of,
swords.
like, in the beginning it feels a little bit like magical surrealism where, Oliver obviously living a little bit out of touch with reality is like magic is real, and all of these things happen because Merlin made them happen, whereas Roland's a little bit more down to earth and he's like, no, obviously not. And then we go full-blown fantasy, which is just, it's brilliant. I personally really enjoyed the book rather, and I know the guys enjoyed the book as well.
I'm a big fan of swords and magical swords and swords being pulled out of stones and swords coming out of lakes and swords on fire, swords made of darkness. Just general swords. They're all
Yeah, and
great.
I'm just an avid lover of Arthurian legend. Swords as well. That doesn't matter where they're pulled from. I just love swords, and I love fantasy. I really can sink my teeth into a good fantasy piece of work. And this is a great piece of work at
Jumping
that.
on that boat, I love swords. I think they're really cool. Swords of all kinds, in fact, including, but not limited to, massive fucking Zweihander swords, which you go into... In this book, you go into an insane amount of detail on the swords. And I know before we talked about this, but obviously our lovely viewers didn't get to hear about it. But what kind of research did you do going into this book?
So, a lot of people don't understand just how big of a researcher an author is, especially for fantasy authors and just in general. I mean, when you work in fantasy, and if you kind of, with this one being a dystopian, you really have to make everything as completely real and believable as possible. And the idea for the Zweihander actually come in. I was sitting down watching an episode of Forged in Fire. I'm a blacksmith, and actually, the book is my kind of call tag is Iron Scribe Publications, which is my publishing. And actually, when you open up the front cover, you'll see under my name there is a anvil with a quill pen on it. But I was sitting there watching an episode of Forged in Fire, and at the very end, they made a Zweihander, and I was looking at this thing and just the mass of this weapon and how absolutely incredible it was, and I was like, this thing deserves some kind of recognition. It deserves a more staple place in history. And I got to thinking about all the different swords out there that have notoriety. And I even mentioned it in the book. If you go back and look at Kangaskhan's sword, you go back and you look at Excalibur, and there's a few others. I was like, I don't recall this sword ever being anything more than just a creation of necessity. So I was like, this thing deserves its own place. And that's when I got the idea to go in and make this sword become a new part of what would be my twist on Arthurian legend. And the research behind knowing exactly the different parts of the sword and what the sword is used for was quite interesting to see what all goes into it and what it was originally made for. But I really wanted to give it a place to shine, and I hope I did that with the book.
Oh, I mean, absolutely.
I think you definitely did. I mean, some of the combat scenes in there. Oh, sorry, Harry, what were you saying?
Oh, no. I literally was truly just echoing positive reinforcement. Just like, go Caleb, man. I mean, come on. What a guy.
I had a rocket of a time reading this. I literally, like I said, over the course of 2 days, I didn't put the book down. I really enjoyed it. But some of the battle scenes as well, they're not so much like all this. I mean, they are very much like fancy flourishing and stuff, but it's very grounded. And I guess as well, it's that kind of thing where when you're making a fantasy book, there's that thing, or a fantasy or a science fiction book, there's that thing of adults only being able to ask like a maximum of 2 questions. And it's like, oh, well, why can he do that? And it's like, well, he can do that because he's got a very in-tune link with the weapon he uses. And it's like, but why? And it's like, because it's kind of magical. And it's like, oh, okay. And that's it. That's all you need to say.
Yeah, and the thing is, that is so true. Like, that goes into Star Wars and Star Trek. Things like, how can you do hyperdrive? Because of this. Okay. Like, adults usually can only ask 2 questions before they're just like, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that's the great thing about fantasy, too, is that you really don't have to have an explanation on anything. Now, mind you, when you can provide that explanation, it makes things a lot more real. And one of my favorite examples of this, if anybody's ever seen the show Charmed, about the 3 sisters who end up being witches, one of them have the ability to make things kind of spontaneously explode. And that ability actually is grounded in the fact that her power is to make the cells, or if organic or whatever she's targeting, to vibrate at such a rapid speed that they explode. And that scientific explanation behind it, I was just really satisfied with that. So everything I did in the book, I wanted to give it as much of a grounded explanation as possible, just to give that sense of realism behind it.
Absolutely. Because it's like when you are crafting magic, you have kind of this spectrum that you can play with of like, okay, you've got all the way on Lord of the Rings side, not bashing Lord of the Rings. I love those books, love those movies, but like, why is Gandalf? Why can he shoot light? He's a wizard. It's magic. Get over it. All right. But then you go all the way over to like a hard magic system where everything has internal rules and limitations and like a top and a bottom, a ceiling and a floor that you can hit. That's sort of like that radius of magic that within that place, that sort of liminal space, you're playing with the rule set. And I find those can be super rewarding to write and describe, because it's like you are enforcing limitations on your world, and it's within those limitations you can get so much character and so much like inspiration out of it just off the dome. Really, really awesome stuff.
Yeah, I remember when I used to have to write for university and for my degree, there was always that thing of like, give yourself a limitation. Like, for instance, it would be like, only write in iambic pentameter. It's like, bitch, I ain't Shakespeare. But also, giving yourself all sorts of limitations can lead to a better product at the end of things. Yeah, it truly is insane. Like, if you try to limit something, you end up going way further in one direction. So if you have a really grounded magic system, like in a D&D game or in a fantasy novel, it helps out the end product a lot.
One of the things as far as limitations go, and I really wanted to make sure I put this in there, not to give too much away, but the way the brothers, the power of the swords work is they have to be in tandem. They have to be completely in sync with what their kind of where their hearts are and where their mind is. So if they have a big disagreement on something, the power of the swords doesn't work. And not to land too much as to what's going to happen, but you have to wonder what happens when the two of them aren't together to make a decision on something. How are they able to communicate and really come to one resolve if they're not in the same vicinity?
Absolutely. And that's just like great world building and just like setting a precedent, and like in the reader's mind it's like, okay, this is a rule, they have to work in tandem. What's going to happen when they don't? It's just a great little fun little thing,
And
Love seeing it.
it is a double-edged sword, doing that as well, because like one thing I love is an excuse is because it's fucking magic. Obviously, it was in a fantasy setting. Like when I went into the world building stage of my campaign, there's a lot of things like, how do I explain this? And I was like, because fucking magic. That's why it's such a good MacGuffin to be like, fuck you, it's magic. Magic can do whatever you want. And you 9 times out of 10 people will go, that makes sense because fucking magic. But also on the other end of that coin, when I was creating this thing called the Spell Crisis, I was like, how did this happen? And I didn't want to say just because magic. I was like, no, I need a fucking reason for this. And I was like, okay, a god died, and if a god died in the material plane, that would cause a massive burst of divination magic to spread throughout the world. So there would be newfound magic wielders, like divine sorcerers, and I then went into that one thing I had ripped myself into a corner, but it wasn't like I was worried because this arc hasn't even come up with my campaign yet, and I started writing this a year ago. But I was like, okay, spell crisis, and then what would the people do with now this newfound power? And I then started like building and building and building and building, and I've got this whole huge arc planned for my campaign. So it is both a good thing and a bad thing, because sometimes it's just an easy escape to be like, because fucking magic, like why does this work? Because magic. How can they do that? Because magic, But it also, sometimes when you do ground it and give a reason for it, you can get a lot out of it.
And I think we mentioned in the last recording we talked about Avatar, but you brought that up, and don't get me wrong, I love the original series, and Legend of Korra is frustrating to say the least.
Oh, I honestly
understatement.
Agree. Oh, honestly, the first time I watched Legend of Korra, I was like, this is amazing, I love it so much. And then I literally rewatched it with my other half, I think 3 months ago, and I was like, fuck this show, man. God damn, I hate how much they just shit on the legacy of Avatar. And it was the same guys, so I mean, like, they can do the fuck they want with their own world. But I was just like, man, like, it was like Rey from Star Wars. It was like training without skills bullshit. And then there'll be people probably going, fuck you, Ali. Korra went through so much. Yeah, Korra went through too much, man. Like, see when you saw some of the details in her face, a part of me was like, are these writers getting off on hurting Korra? Especially just getting that metal thing put into her body. The close-ups in the face are weird, man. But no, I loved about Avatar. Because sometimes, don't get me wrong, there's been a few shows, movies, anime I've watched where they're like, people can do this because of this. I'm like, that's actually really cool. I like knowing where that came from. And there's other times where I like it being unknown, and I loved how in the original Avatar, it was like, how can people bend? Well, they learn from different ways. The waterbenders learn from the moon and watching the waves. Earthbenders learn from badger moles. Firebenders learn from dragons. And airbenders learn from flying bison. I actually loved that. That's actually really cool. It's like they took something from nature, because bending is a very natural, very it's elements. I mean, come on. So it's very nature based. And I thought it was cool that they learned off things that nature provided. And then in the fucking same Korra, it's like, no, they all come from dragon turtles. That's it, or lion turtles. Can't remember what that is. So they all come from these turtles. That's it. But they perfected it by watching these things. I was like, don't get me wrong. the first ever Avatar, I love a show around him. He seemed like a pretty, like, Wu seemed like a pretty cool guy, but I didn't like how it was like, actually, everything we covered in the whole Last Airbender, yeah, no, it comes from dragon turtles and that's it, just deal with it. I was like, but I liked it came from badger moles and stuff, and I guess you could still say, technically they learned to perfect it through these animals, because you see Wu perfecting his firebending through watching that dragon, but still, I liked when it was more unknown. How can people bend? Well, we think it's because of this, we don't really know, but at core is like, nope, lion turtles, that's it. It's like, okay, sure. Why not?
And there's not much explanation for the lion turtles either. It's just they're there and that's what they do.
Yeah, how did the lion turtles get it? Well, the lion turtles, they actually learned from the moles, the moon, the dragon. That's how they know how to do it.
It's that kind of thing of like where you go so far back in the world building history of something, and it's like, yeah, obviously no one has any fucking idea, because here's the thing, that was either thousands or millions of years ago, and anyone who's alive back then, no longer alive. One thing I'll say on the Legends of Korra thing is the art that they chose to do, like the art style they chose to do for that whole arc bit about Wu, I loved it.
Oh, I love that. And the thing is, I'm not going to shit in Korra too much. I did love the setting. The setting in the kind of like steampunk age made so much sense to me. I loved that because like it's how the world like kind of evolved. I just when it came to becoming more like Power Rangers with two, like the Dark Avatar is probably the most funniest and stupidest thing. Now the thing is, see if you apply that concept to anything else, it's actually pretty badass, because think about most movies you watch, especially for me, anime does it a lot. There's always a usual vast equal but contrast to the good guy. So when you think about Avatar, a Dark Avatar would probably be kind of badass, but the way they handled it was so dumb, and it turned into this like big kaiju fight in the city. I was like, what has happened to this show? Like, they could have done the Dark Avatar thing. I think they could have still done it and it not been as dumb as it was done in the show. We could talk about, I could rant about this forever, man.
We could just talk about the whole episode. Could just be Avatar. We could just talk about the Last Airbender and Korra. That's all we could do.
Well, to talk about Avatar and talk about the book, why don't I steer it in this course? For your two main characters, Caleb, what type of benders do you think there would be?
Oh goodness. To segue off that, and I'll answer that in a second. But you mentioned how things work, and the reason I brought up Legend of Korra was I give them credit in the fact that when they got to the point to where I was like, okay, well, where are we going with the show? And then the very next season was, oh, now we have airbenders popping up. That to me made the most sense on a linear progression than anything else. Okay, we fixed the spirit world and things are kind of getting back into the way they're supposed to be. And that reflected on the fact that the world was out of balance because there was no airbenders left, or only, Tenzin's family. So that to me was the best little aspect of writing. And I think what they did in the show, they were like, okay, eventually we're going to bring in more airbenders. How do we get there? And so I think that was the event that led up to that decision. So I give them credit there. Rest of the show, but the harmonic convergence, fixing the unbalance in the elements was key. I give them credit.
Yeah,
super cool.
Yeah, no, it was pretty cool, and it's a quick wee thing at the end. What was Mako's brother called again? The Earthbender. Bolin. He was a great, smart character, but they made him an emotional punching bag for the last season. And if you now, I guess it's a kid's show. Well, I'm saying it because it's on Nickelodeon, so you could think, oh, kids are not going to get it. But the fact is, they make humor out of literal emotional abuse that he goes through. Is so fucked up. Like, he is being emotionally and physically abused by his girlfriend, and it's meant to be just for laughs, which is really fucked up when you think about it. But he was a really good character, and they made him this dumb, just idiot, quick squeeze for laughs character in the last season, man. Like, obviously the emotional abuse thing, that was, I think, season 2, whenever he meets Southern Water, or the Northern Water.
With Aubrey Plaza, the Aubrey Plaza character.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, the character was kind of fun, but it was straight up emotional and physical abuse. That's what it was. Their idea for quick laughs was having this guy be emotionally abused. Like, that is what it is. Like people might go, oh, you're looking too much into it. No, she was literally emotionally abusing him and making fun of the violence that he was getting.
I think they shot for Asaka and totally missed.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's more of like a I don't know if I don't know how well versed anyone here is with Commedia dell'arte, the old Italian.
Oh,
Harry, you
stop!
maybe. Yeah,
Stop, dude!
it's that kind of Piero character where he's like a sad clown, but he's a subservient. He's a low status character, and I think they kind of aimed, like you were saying, Caleb. They aimed for the Sokka and hit the Piero. They went
Yeah,
straight for an
exactly.
archetype.
I I think the thing that's so okay, I have a lot of gripes with Legend of Korra. We all know this. Everyone knows this. Even you listening, you know this absolutely, without question. I think the interesting thing for me, the reason why I don't like Legend of Korra, is the Avatar world was always so firmly rooted in Eastern cultures, and you move into Legend of Korra and you kind of move away from that. You kind of create New York City, and
Right.
it feels disjointed to me because it's like I wanted to see the natural progression of what kind of like how does the Eastern culture evolve from this, but we kind of just got New York City, right
Yeah.
down to like they're like the
How many
old timey
years was
man.
there between Aang's death?
I don't know. It's like 60, right? It's like 60 something.
Yeah, it's
50
like
something?
I think
It's
it
not.
is
It's
60
not
years
a
later.
crazy time because Katara's still alive, and I know Aang died. I think Aang died at 60 or
I mean, it's
something, but that
kinda obvious.
Yeah,
Aang
well,
died
no,
in
no,
another
I'm saying as in, I
Avatar.
think he died around like age 64 or something because I think
Yeah.
the reason they said
That makes
was
sense.
is he died fairly young, but they also accounted the time he was in the iceberg for, so he kind of
Yeah.
used up a lot of his time, and that's why he died fairly young. 'Cause I think
Mans was like
60
160.
Yeah, because like 60 is still pretty young, you know what I mean? So the fact he died at 60 is still a pretty young time to go, but I think they did come, I think it was an interview or something they says because he spent 100 years, and that's still time, he was frozen, but that's still time his body aged, so he did die fairly young.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Oh
But,
man,
The
it
tan-
makes me so sad.
to go back to the question between Roland and Oliver, what type of bender do you think there would be? I think Oliver would definitely be a firebender. He seems
100%.
like Oliver seems very hot-headed and like he's got that anger because like we touched on it very very briefly and how like most firebenders because like apart from Iroh, Zuko was the one to learn to bend from dragons. A lot of firebenders use their anger, and the way Oliver is written, I think you've taken that because Oliver is a very much an angry character. So I think he would definitely be a firebender because he's a lot of pent-up anger you see throughout the book.
Yeah, he's very ground. I mean, he's not grounded, but he's grounded in his emotions. A lot of the decisions he makes, and if you haven't read the book, the big decision that he makes that spins us spiraling into what is a an insane change in the world that even what we know, it's because of that such an attachment to his emotions and such disregard. And I think that's what plays most into his thought of being a finder because Oliver has a piece of me. I have severe white knight syndrome. Like I am, and actually, the lady I work with, she tells me all the time. She's like, "You have a severe case of white knight syndrome," and I do. I do. I mean, I have no problem with that. If I can help someone out, I'm going to. I'm going to do everything I can to do it. And I think that kind of plays into what the Fire Nation thought. They're like, we are the saviors.
As long as you don't tip your hat and say "my lady," you're all good, man.
Incredible.
No comment. It's also that like self-righteous nature as well because he's all of his actions are very like self-affirming. Like he believes he is consistently doing the right thing.
Oh
even
yeah,
when
100%.
even when
all the
he
way
is
throughout.
literally even when he is literally date raping his brother.
Hey, retrospective spoiler alert.
That's
Yeah.
a minor spoiler. I'd say that's a minor spoiler like that. Considering everything that the book entails, honestly, just quickly hats off again to you. A phenomenal book and phenomenal writing. I'd say him drugging his brother to miss that interview. That's a fairly low spoiler compared to the phenomenal things that happen later on in the book. That's pretty small beans compared
But
to
that right
the
there
things that
leads
unfold.
into kind of the first insight into Oliver as a character. I mean, you care so little about your brother and about his life that you're going to basically commit what ends up being the ultimate betrayal that leads to spoiler death of the planet. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's immense because you want this feeling of like I had a dream. Me and my brother were always going to be nice. you are so self-righteous in that goal that you do whatever it takes because you think it's good for other people, because you think other people want your dream. It's
Right.
it's so fucked up. But again, it is that like it's still like, even though he does these fucked up things, the main theme of the book is still brotherhood.
Yeah, and for all the craziness that happens in the book, you keep your main themes, and please correct me if I'm wrong, pretty accurately to being, willpower, faith, and brotherhood throughout the whole book.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you even see it, with Roland and Oliver. And after that big reveal happens, and Roland storms off, and basically is dead. I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, that piece of them, you have to wonder: does Roland forgive him? Find a way to forgive him to keep from dying, or does Roland truly forgive him? And that answer comes in the fact that the swords work. Had he
Mhm.
not truly forgiven him for what he done, it wouldn't have happened. And one of my favorite lines that come later on is, um, Lionel tells him, anger is permitted, but malice of the heart isn't. You
Yeah.
can't, you can be, and I kind of got this off my other brothers. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and no matter what, we can be pissed off. And I fought with my brothers. I mean, I tried to hit one of them with a chair one time. So I
Oh,
mean,
it's actually you get away with that because Kingsley literally hit me with a chair when we were children and gave me a black eye for like 2 months.
Lamped him.
WrestleMania.
Absolutely lamped him. But it's true. Like, you see it in the writing as well. Like, obviously you see it in the writing. We don't have an audiobook version yet, but you see like how quickly it changes. Like, they're doing all right. They're having a good time. Then all of a sudden they're wrestling on a cave floor, beating the shit out of each other, and then they're back to being good friends. And that is what it is like having a brother so close in age. I don't know what it's like to have a twin, but I can imagine it's tenfold like what it is to have a brother.
yeah, and I've done it with my brothers before too. And I actually have a set of cousins who are twins. And just being out with them, I've seen that full hand where all of a sudden they're in each other's face, cussing each other out, ready to go to blows, and then 10 minutes later, it's like nothing ever happened, which was the wildest thing to me. And then as I got older, I realized that's what happens when your siblings and me and my older brother's 3 years and my younger brother's 3 years. We're all exactly, or I'm 3 years apart from both of them. And even we share that bond that you see Roland and Oliver have. And I think I really played into the way they kind of bicker back and forth, and that kind of camaraderie between them kind of lend into that bond that they share.
Yeah, it is that like
Absolutely.
mocking love, because there's a brilliant quote. There's this brilliant quote, and this made me genuinely chuckle. It's when they find Camelot, very early on, and I think it's Oliver says, "Too bad I don't have a spoon," or is it Oliver or Roland that says, "Too bad I don't have a spoon from Mum's kitchen." The other brother responds, "Do you need a pot in your head too?" And then he says, "Yeah, fuck you, buddy." It's that kind of like bickering, but it is very much in good spirit.
And I did that too with the knights who come in, the sworn ones. And I chose, a lot of people probably won't see it. And I actually didn't know I had done this until later on. One of my favorite books is The Three Musketeers, and I
Mhm.
didn't realize I had incidentally made the Sworn Ones almost a parallel to the Three Musketeers. So if you've ever read the book, or if you've ever even watched the movie, Lionel is Athos, the serious one, kind of noble, loyal to the cause, and then you have Porthos, who is more kind of, he's kind of the brute, but then again, he's very kind of fun loving, just does whatever he does. That's definitely Leo de Grant's and his
Mhm.
his take on everything. Then you have Aramis, who he's very grounded, and kind of leans in both ways, and that ends up being kind of what Caradoc is like. But throughout the book, Aramis and Porthos are very close, and they have that general backbiting nature to each other. And I didn't realize I'd done it, but it turned out really well, and that brotherhood really shows in those two too, and they're centuries old. and how long they've been together.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I mean, that's a classic thing, right? I mean, like Gimli, Legolas. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
Right. I love
iconic.
their camaraderie together.
I love that bromance so bad. So bad, so good. Like one of the bits sticks out more in my mind. I don't know why. It's not even a bit with Gimli or Legolas. It's when Gimli and Aragorn are about to jump to the wall, and he's like, "Don't tell the elf about this." I love that scene.
So
I don't
good.
know why that is the first thing that pops into my head to think about Gimli and Legolas. Just that one bit from the movie pops into my head. Don't tell the elf about this.
On the topic of the Three Musketeers, favorite Musketeer, guys? Can I get a favorite Musketeer in the chat?
Oh, mine is without a doubt. Actually, you know what? Oh God, I thought it was gonna be until you asked the question.
mine's the peanut butter one. Is that niche? Is that?
Oh, shut up.
Does that hit for UK audiences? Did we have Three Musketeers, or is that only an American thing?
Oh, wow.
Wait, there's actually a peanut butter Three Musketeers in the UK.
Yeah,
I
there
swear
is.
that-
There
I
is.
Are
swear
you
there is-
joking?
It's like chocolate, vanilla, and peanut butter. I swear,
Damn, dude. That's some, like, Mandela effect shit right there.
I mean, it may not even be a thing, but that tracks with me. Like, that might be a Mandela effect, because that totally tracks with me. Let me quickly look it up. Give me a sec.
I think say the only Three Musketeer candy I've ever had is just like the chocolate, the hard chocolate outside, and then like the fluffy chocolate on the inside.
Oh, I am someone who hates peanut butter, and my other half loves it. Okay, I typed in Three Musketeers peanut butter, and nothing's coming up. This might be a Mandela effect thing.
whoa, you know what?
Bro, you're getting blown the fuck out live
give me-
right
give
now.
me a
on this
sec.
episode.
I think you
I-
say
let me
UK
just type
audience
in-
needs to
Let
chime
me just
in on
type
that.
in Three
I did
Musketeers
myself.
candy. Oh no, wait, yeah, there's a chocolate bar called Three Musketeers. The Three Musketeers candy bar made in the United States, Canada by Mars. So what it is, it's the Americans' version of the Mars bar, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
very cool.
This is a free spot. This is a free shout out to them. They do not sponsor us. It's a candy bar consisting of chocolate covered fluffy whipped mousse. It's literally just the
Yes.
Americans' version of the Mars bar.
Yes,
Dude, I'm
and
so
it's
fucking
great.
hungry right now. So fucking hungry right now. No, yeah, I
But to
mean,
answer
before
your-
we move
to
on
answer your
entirely
que-
from this
but to
bit.
answer- to answer your question,
No, yeah.
Armis is my favourite. I love the whole young man who heads between religion is calling for fondness of women and scheming. I've played a lot of D&D characters like that, and I've written a lot of characters for that, and just chat room RPs. Now, not the religion part so much, but kind of like replacing the religiousness with your fondness for duty, and you're calling for women. I kind of like playing that kind of ladies man who loves women but has to keep his mind on track for a goal. I think it's a very cliche character type, but I like characters like that. Not all my characters are like that. I actually do my characters very differently, but I just, because of that personal attachment for me of loving a type of character, I probably Armis personally for me.
Makes sense. It
Porthos.
definitely tracks.
Porthos through and through.
Porthos is a
He's a-
great character.
He's that comedic relief, and he's a little bit gullible. He's a little bit like stupid sometimes, but you know, ultimately, he never wavers from his duty. He's always loyal to the cause.
Makes sense.
Speaking of which, if you haven't yet and you have Hulu, the show The Musketeers, I'm currently binging it. I'm in the third season. There's only 3 seasons.
I have not
Fantastic
watched that, but I've heard a lot about it. And
So good.
And the thing is, I need to watch that show because my boy who played Lancelot in Merlin plays Armis in that show, and I loved Lancelot
That's
in
right.
Merlin. He was
My wife
so-
pointed that out, and I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. I love that handsome man. Literally, sorry, spoiler for the show Merlin, but the show has been out for years, literal years.
yourself.
When he died, it sucked. When he died for a second time, it sucked even more. I loved Lancelot in Merlin.
And that's the
The
guy who
spoiler
plays
boys.
Aramis, right?
Yeah, he plays Aramis in the Musketeer show.
Okay,
that's a show
now
I want to start.
nothing
definitely.
against gay people. I have nothing against that. If I was gay, that dude is my choice. He is gorgeous.
That's how I
that's
felt
funny.
about Khal Drogo. Khal Drogo.
No. See, my other half is gonna know for you. Like, as soon as you said that, Kingsley, I know for a fact when Anne hears this when it comes out on YouTube, she's just gonna look at me. But yes, to people that know me, no surprise, I'm a very straight man. I love women. I love my women more than anything. But if I was to bat for the other team, Jason Momoa would be my first choice, 100%. But it's funny because
Same-sex celebrity crushes Just write them down.
Yeah,
We know you got them.
The funny thing is, I get where you're coming from, Caleb, because when I first watched Merlin with my other half, when the guy said I'm Lancelot, I was like, oh, of course they've got this guy to play Lancelot. Like, he looks like a Lancelot. Like, the lover of women, like that classic Night at the Round Table is Lancelot. The casting picking that man was perfect. And sorry, I'm insulting him because I can't remember the actor's name, but he was a great choice for Lancelot.
Santiago something another. Oh, I can't think of his name right now.
Here we go. I'll get it up right now.
Yeah,
live.
Before we move on,
Santiago Cabrera.
Yep.
Oh, sick. So sick. Before we move on, I just want to have it on record that I am a D'Artagnan. I know he's not technically a musketeer, but I love him anyways.
Side note on that, that's my son's name.
I do.
No way. That's awesome, dude.
I do have a question for
Good
you,
name.
Caleb. Have you ever watched the show Merlin?
I have not, and my wife is.
Oh,
a
you
huge fan of it,
haven't?
and
That's really
she
surprising,
says,
considering
"I
you wrote
have
a
to
book
watch it."
around Camelot.
Yes, and one of my biggest regrets is that because I've never seen Quest for the Holy Grail either, like Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail. I've never seen that either, and I wanted so bad to watch that and put a reference in the book somewhere, and I just never got around to doing it. But my wife is a huge fan of Merlin.
We can stop this recording right now. Right now. Stop the recording right now. We're going to go to Discord. I'm going to stream the Holy Grail. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
I have too much melatonin in my bloodstream to, if I stop now, I'll either die or fall asleep. It's never too late to watch Merlin. It came out, I think, 8 years ago, and I watched it for the first time 2 months ago with Anne. She'd watched it 4 times. Prepared to cry at the ending, I will say that. I'm a guy who doesn't cry at anything. You show me, I mean, I think the first thing I cried at was Marley and Me, respectively. I don't cry at TV shows and movies no matter how sad it is, and I literally cannot lie, a single tear rolled down my face at the end of the Merlin show. I will not give any spoilers because for those listening, if you've not watched it, do yourself a favour and watch it. But the reason I was asking you, Caleb, if you watched Merlin was they do an honour to Arthurian legend, they really do, but they also tell it in their own way. And this is a slight spoiler, but also if you're going to watch a show about King Arthur, not really a spoiler, Mordred's in it. And for those who know Arthurian legend, you know who Mordred is. And in almost every telling, he is either the bastard son of King Arthur, or the inbred bastard son, or a brother. But in the show Merlin, Mordred is just this druid boy who King Arthur's dad made an enemy from killing off the druids. And that's not even a spoiler, because in episode 1 you find out that magic was outlawed by King Arthur's dad, and he will kill any, like, the magic users in the show are people called druids. And he outlawed them once they're hunted down. But it was very different from the case of, this was the first time I'd ever saw Mordred in a telling of Arthurian legend where he wasn't attached to Arthur in that kind of way. He was no connections whatsoever. So going forward with that, was there any of your own personal spins you put on Arthurian legend in your book?
First off, in original Arthurian legend, Camelot is a real place, and so when I made it to where Camelot was on a totally different plane created by Merlin, again, the level of spoiler alerts we put through this, if you haven't read it by now, but to find out that Camelot was on a totally different plane and essentially a prison for the dragons of origin. Because, there's, as far as I've ever read, there is no talk of dragons throughout Arthurian legend.
Which is crazy when you think about it, isn't it? With all the knights and dragons tellings of the world, it's crazy to think that if you really read the bones of Arthurian legend, there's not much mention of a dragon.
No, and that's why, and I'm a huge fan of dragons.
Dude,
I don't know any fantasy person
got me a
who's not.
dragon mini for Christmas. I've made a dragon deck in Magic, both in Commander and Standard. Arc, even though in Arc they're wyverns, I have got countless amounts of dragons. I love dragons so much. So I'm with you on that one.
This is a weird spin, a weird direction to take this in. But recently I was watching an interview with, I believe it's Griffin McElroy, one of the McElroy brothers. And he was talking about, this is an insane take, but it struck with me so hard, what if the whole reason we have this cultural memory of dragons, where
Oh,
almost
wait a
everywhere in
minute.
Europe,
Wait a fucking minute. I think I know what you're going to say. I have not watched the review. I'm probably going to get hate for this. Those names, the Mocalry, what was he said? They don't ring a bell to me.
McElroy,
But I'm bad.
yeah.
But the thing is, I'm also bad with names. I'd probably see their face and go, those guys. From memory, I don't know who they are. But I want to say something to you and tell me if this is the route you're going down. Now, for all the listeners here, you might be like me. You probably have your greatest thoughts and epiphanies when you're on the shitter. That's what happens for me. Most of my big campaign moments in D&D are all my creative stuff. Even this thing, saving throws, all came to me when I was on the toilet. And I was reading a thing about how birds can fly on hollow bones and all that crap. Well, I had this fucked up thought, and I said to Anne, and for those who don't know by now, Anne's my fiance. She looked at me like, that's crazy and also makes sense. Now, dragons are depicted all over the world. They are. Almost like Christianity and with the good book, it's depicted almost everywhere. Dragons are depicted in almost every part of the world you can go to. And I think the reason that we have not found proof of dragons is if dragons could fly, they'd have hollow bones. Hollow bones, as proof, do not fossilize well or age well. They just turn to nothing. And what if the T-Rex skull was actually a dragon head because the wings and stuff, they can't fossilize because they're hollow bones. But what if all the T-Rex heads we kept finding all over the world were actually dragon heads and they couldn't find the body because they had hollow bones?
okay, so we obviously, you know what, whatever you subscribe to or prescribe to religiously, there is the idea of evolution, obviously, and the idea that humans came from small mammalian creatures.
If you
that
say humans
existed-
came from dragons, and if we could somehow
No,
make
no.
that true, I'm gonna start breathing fire real soon. I'm gonna figure
Not
it out.
just yet.
I'll figure it out and I'm gonna do
Not
it.
just yet. But there's that whole thing of like, obviously mammals were around at the time dinosaurs were around. So what if there's that strange genetic memory? We were talking about this on we'll call it the Lost episode. We were talking about this on the Lost episode.
Oh wait,
but
are you
this
talking
whole
about
idea-
are you talking about when Caleb said about genetic memory for coming from bending
exactly.
and Avatar? Are you using
Exactly,
that
yeah.
right now?
Yeah, no, but genetic memory is a very real thing. That's right. You know, some people have
Oh,
not
100%.
allergies, but some people are more averse to things than others. But what if it's that whole idea of when we were small mammals, obviously these dinosaurs were insanely big creatures, big reptilian or avian creatures that were just walking around. That is a massive fear for any small mammalian creature walking about. So what if we have all this genetic memory kicking about and it's like from way long ago where it's like, oh, these big scary lizard things and some of them could fly. That's dragons. You've also got the whole thing of like snakes, birds, and big cat like predators. Smush them all together, what do you get? Fucking dragons, dude. So it's just this genetic memory of pure fear, like shit instilling fear.
I don't like that because that, unless I'm hearing you wrong, you're basically saying our genetic memory has lumped all these animals into one. With my theory, dragons were their own thing and could have possibly existed. With what you're saying is, you're just saying no to dragons, full stop.
Look, I'm not saying no.
Fuck you, dragon rights. I'm here to speak the good word of dragons, and I will fight for dragons, man.
Okay. So depending on what you believe religiously, I am a Christian, but going into, and a lot of people don't know, or they may know, my very first published book, it did not do well. We didn't go through the same process as we did with this one. It was kind of a very rushed, throw it out there kind of thing. Is called Scourge, and it's about a pirate who is possessed by the biblical spirit of the Leviathan. And if you go through and look at in Job from the original King James, in chapter 41, it talks about the Leviathan, and the description of the Leviathan matches 100% what we believe to be a mainstream dragon. If you believe the words of the Bible are true, then there is 100% fact that the Leviathan, a described dragon in the Bible, was and possibly still is completely real.
See, the thing is, like, even I'm glad you brought religion into that and talking about the serpent. Is I personally, I follow the old religion. I'm a pagan who believes in Odin and Freyr and Thor. And that's just where my freak flag flies, or like the last episode named after my horrible wording, freak flavor. It's where it flies. And there's even in the Norse, there's great tellings of Jormungandr, the world serpent, who was basically going to swallow the sea and kill us all. But even to take it in, the depictions in cave paintings all over the world of dragons, even in religion, these massive serpents are all there. It's just so interesting to me, and I'm kind of glad dragons don't exist now. I mean, don't get me wrong, if it's like D&D dragons, or some dragons in like from Merlin, for example, that are super intelligent and just love talking, I'd be cool if they were still around today. But if it was just your classic lizard brain dragons who had to burn and eat everything, I'm so glad they're not around anymore.
No, I'm taming a dragon.
Yeah.
If there's a dragon, I'm taming a dragon.
Oh yeah, no, straight up. I am going to tie a belt round my bicep, and I'm going to inject dragon blood right into my bloodstream, and I'm going to go full House Targaryen, like blood of the dragon. I'll probably get horribly sick and probably die, or I'll become. Hey, we do not know. We need dragon blood to test it, and I might become, the first actual real House Targaryen member.
Yeah. We were talking about the Book of Jove, and Jove 18-21 says, its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze and flames dart from its mouth. That's a fucking dragon, dude.
That's a full dragon.
Full-on fucking dragon. And there's just so many different depictions of it. You have your more Western dragons, with the 4 legs or 4 limbs, if you're going to look at it, and massive wings. And you've got the very Asian style of dragon where they're more like snakes with no wings at all. The Chinese depiction is there's no wings.
And
it's just
way more sapient.
Yeah, way more sapient, way more reptilian,
more divine.
But I just let's get back on topic, but I think any listeners know that us here at Saving Throws and our guest Caleb, we really fucking love dragons.
We love swords. We love dragons.
That's right. Well, that's what the Dragons of Origin were all about. When I looked at, I was like, okay, so look at all the different kinds of dragons. You got Eastern dragons and you got Western dragons. And I was like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, if you're gonna say that all dragons ever depicted boiled down to this, what did they boil down to? And it boiled down to an Eastern dragon, it boiled down to a Western dragon, and then I had a drake and a wyvern. And that to me was kind of, and if you read the book and you get to the end of the book, you can see as we get into the point where the Dragons of Origin, they don't mate the way a normal organism would. They don't have sex. They can spontaneously have a child, and the egg is already fertilized and hatches a dragon. From there, each dragon has to mate the normal way an animal would. So even in the dragon depicted at the end of Camelots Reckoning is a third generation dragon, where the second generation dragon, where the first generation dragon was from the Dragons of Origin. It mated with a dragon of different physical traits and therefore created the dragon they ended up facing, and it goes even into the way the elements are passed down and the way the physical traits are passed down. And I wanted to do that because the fact is that through the imagination of writing, through the imagination of artists and how they portray dragons, even to modern day, dragons and their physical traits and their elemental traits span a just massive spectrum. So if you say that the Dragons of Origin can mate or produce an offspring, the offspring can then mate with an offspring from a different Dragon of Origin, the possibilities are completely endless. And that to me was exactly what I wanted to achieve.
Well, I have a point to add to that. I have a question for you guys right now. Have any of you guys either read or watched Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
No.
And
Never watched Game of Thrones, never read it.
Okay, so Caleb and Kings, have you read or watched or both?
I've watched it.
I
I
read the first book and watched it all, and
okay,
you know me, I'm a
okay.
lore whore, baby.
No,
So
no,
I
no.
know a
I'm a
lot
lore
of
whore.
lore.
I started off watching, and I actually the first Game of Thrones book I ever read wasn't actually the TV show like what we saw. It wasn't Ned Stark's journey and all that. The first book I ever read was called Fire and Blood, and it was the short George R. R. Martin wrote. I think it was a book you can get. It's a great read. And Fire and Blood, I think the book is 5 stories, so they're all tracking different things. The first story is about Aegon's conquest. He was the for those listening who watch Game of Thrones, the show picks up with Daenerys, and they reference Aegon a lot. He was the one who came to the West and essentially took over because he was the owner of the dragons. The Seven Kingdoms had all these insane armies, but when it came to dragons, there were no match for them apart from Dorne. And that'll be a different episode. I'll talk about Game of Thrones and rant about it. Also, quick part: the best story in Fire and Blood is A Dance of Dragons. It is all about a Targaryen civil war where the houses
my God.
where the houses were infighting. I've read that, literally have read that one story in that book 11 times, and I've listened to the audiobook of it 3 times. That one story is so amazing. I actually ended up starting a whole RP on Discord. I think I had like 200 people in it before I ended up closing it down. It was all about the Dance of Dragons storyline with my own spin on it because I wanted to make it my own. But great read, and they actually confirmed they're making that HBO next. And I'm just trying to think. They said the budget. They said the
So good.
budget. Well, I'm just confused because they said the budget for the dragons in the later seasons is why a lot of the things, like that's why the fight against the Night King was so short, because they needed to save budget for the dragons. I don't know how they're going to do a show about a Targaryen civil war where it's that, by the way, that, and for those listening, that's the civil war that caused the Targaryens to lose all their dragons.
Yeah.
They had 20 dragons at the start of the civil war, and as it ended, all dragons are fucking killed essentially. But in George R. R. Martin's his way of dragons is dragons can switch genders, so if they ever all get wiped out and there's one left, they can start over again. I like, for example, a lot of people thought I hate the last season of Game of Thrones. It's just, I think everyone universally agrees on that. But a lot of people thought that because of Rhaegal dying, spoiler alert, but if Game of Thrones is being spoiled for you by now, I'm sorry. Everyone thought Drogon was going to lay an egg and Daenerys was going to give that egg to Jon or whatever, because dragons in the Game of Thrones can flip their genders to fertilize eggs and whatever you have you. One thing I really liked about George R. R. Martin's idea of dragons is they will grow depending on the environment they're in. So like one reason that the dragon that Aegon himself rose, the dragon he actually conquered the West with, was Balron the Black Dread. He was meant to be bigger than the Red Keep. That's the castle in King's Landing, because he only ever had freedom and he ate whatever he wanted. So he was this insane dragon that was almost bigger than all of King's Landing because he had freedom. And even in the show where you see that all the dragon skulls are moved to the basement, you see Balron the Black Dread's skull, which also isn't even to size. Well, obviously it's a TV show, so they gotta give the prop people some slack. Tyrion, or even the Mountain, is dwarfed in comparison, but as the skulls get lower, you see skulls that are the size of like a house cat skull, and it's because in the Game of Thrones world, dragons will grow depending on the area they're living in and how much they have to eat. And they even say in the books and the show, eventually the dragons were kept in these like massive kind of pens, and that's why through lines and lines of this, and a lot of the dragons dying and not having many ones to breed with, dragons were only ever getting to the size of house cats and then dying because of the environment they were raised in. I just thought that was really interesting, was because but you had Balron, the biggest dragon to ever exist, and then you see the sizes get smaller. It's why, if you remember watching the show, when Drogon escaped and he came back later on, he was far bigger than Rhaegal and Viserion. It's because they were locked inside the pyramid, but Drogon had he could help himself to sheep. He was flying around, he had all the freedom, he slept outside, and you see the noticeable size difference in Drogon compared to his two brothers. And it's because in Game of Thrones, I just love that mythology, or that idea of they grow to the environment they're in. And I wonder if George looked at that as well and kind of looked at I wonder if dragons did exist. Was it just a hollow bones, and made that was kind of why in his world they stopped being a thing, because the people that were hatching the eggs were keeping them in cages and pens, and their sizes were never getting that big. But anyway,
here's
we've
the
talked about
thing.
dragons for a long point. Long time now.
Frogs do that. Green frogs do that. Green frogs.
Here we go.
can
You love
Frogs,
frogs
baby.
so
Look.
much. For listeners that don't know Kingsley personally, he loves frogs.
They're gorgeous creatures. Some higher
Friends.
power put them on this earth to inherit it when we inevitably blow ourselves up.
True.
Frogs are brilliant, and if you're looking for any link to dragons, fuck off, man.
Frogs.
Start there. Fuck off. Start there. Frogs can.
Man, how the
frogs can-
mighty have fallen. How the mighty have fallen if that's what it turned into.
No.
Improved.
How the mighty shall rise from the meat.
Damn. That is deep.
Is that
Look,
going to be
frog-
your next D&D campaign with frogs rising to power and turning back
Have
into
I not
the
told you
dragon
about
race?
this? Quick sidestep from the dragons. I do have a whole, like, the way I start with prepping a D&D campaign is I will start a playlist. So I have a Spotify playlist. I'll send it to you. It's called Music Frogs Possibly Like. And it's just music for this
Fuck's
like
sake.
1980s style frog village that's like a bunch of lily pads and houses stacked on trees and shit, and you can only play grungs or bullywugs. Look, man, I fucking love frogs. But frogs can
just
also
say
take sex.
Fantastic Mr. Fox and go, dude. Just say Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Fantastic
Get out
Mr.
of here.
Frogs. Fantastic Mr. Frogs. But also, on the Game of Thrones thing, it's so interesting that you're so there for the dragons, but what gets me is the actual, like, inner workings of why the Civil War started. Because, like, the Andals have their own laws of, like, inheritance. The succession law.
Oh no!
And the succession law...
God, I love Game of Thrones so much.
Yeah,
I'll continue.
the succession law of
You
the
said
Andals.
that, and you said that succession thing, and I just relived the whole Dance of Dragons book in my head. Sorry,
Yeah.
continue.
quick spoilers for Dance of Dragons if we didn't say that before. But the whole reason it fucking kicks off is literally because I think Aegon died. No, it's not Aegon dies. Viserys dies.
It's Viserys.
And Rhaenyra is the eldest daughter and a well-trained fucking dragon rider, a brilliant combatant. But then her younger half-brother, Aegon II, is like, no, I want to be king.
Well, actually, okay, just to jump on you here, that isn't actually how it goes down. Now, when Aegon conquered the West, he didn't conquer Dorne, because they always say that in the show. Aegon conquered the 7 kingdoms. He conquered 6 of the kingdoms and made a truce with Dorne after Dorne killed Rhaenys, his sister, who was also his wife, because they were the first of a kingdom to actually take down a dragon. And that was after... So he never actually conquered the 7 kingdoms, just a little bit of fun fact there. But what happened was, when he took over the West, essentially the church in like Game of Thrones world, the Western church, the 7, they weren't down for having a foreigner on the throne. But he did unite the 6 kingdoms. And what basically happened was Aegon agreed he would take on their way of living. And that is what his sisters hated, was because, no, we're Targaryens, we're the best. But he was like, Aegon was such a smart, he wasn't just, if you read the books, Aegon didn't just fly over the seas to take over the world. That was his last resort, and after everything failed, he ended up joining in the war and just destroying everybody. But Aegon confined it to the Western way things were done, the Western religion. He stopped worshipping the Targaryen, or I should say the Valyrian gods of Valyria, and he conformed to the 7. So he then, by that, agreed to their laws of inheritance, which means it goes to the firstborn son.
But the Targaryens never formalized their succession laws after the War of Blood.
Yeah, they never did, but the real bitch Viserys never had a son. And he had Rhaenys, who was a phenomenal dragon rider, a phenomenal woman in general, and he didn't have a son until his second wife, because Targaryens believed in, and that was the one thing Aegon didn't budge on. The 7 said you can't have more than one wife, and your wife can't be your fucking sister. Like, that just can't be it. But because Targaryens believe in, or most Valyrians believe in keeping the blood pure, their ancestors created the bond with dragons, so they would only breed with their own. That's why in real life, if you fuck your relative, you're gonna get really weird offspring. But in Game of Thrones, you have beautiful, literal angel-looking children. That's just due to the magic in Targaryen's blood. Like, literally, if you read the books, there's not an ugly Targaryen. Well, there is one, but that's a whole other story. But Targaryens are...
Those are the bastard ones, though, right?
Yeah, Targaryens are usually hypnotic to look at because they're just the dragon blood in them. But Aegon said, I will agree to everything, but I will marry my my sisters, and us as Targaryens, we're not shifting on that. And they never did. But Viserys' second wife had a son, finally, I think it was like 10 years later.
Yeah.
But he wanted to do right by her. In Viserys' eyes was, he didn't care that she wasn't a boy, it was, she was my firstborn and she needs to be done right by. So he had her from the age of 10 go into all of the meetings about the realm, brought into the, what's it called? I can't remember what the meetings are called in Game of Thrones. Basically where you have your hand to the king, you've got your spy master, all that. The council, essentially, yeah. He had her sit in every council meeting from the age of 10 upwards, and he then brought every lord, and she was only like 15 or something at the time, or I think she was still 10. He brought every lord in Westeros to come swear allegiance to Rhaenys. So he was making sure, it wasn't that he hated his son Aegon. He loved Aegon the Second. He wanted to do right by his daughter, and he made every lord swear to her. But what happened was
Aegon staged the coup.
When Viserys died, his second wife, because Rhaenys' mum wasn't alive, his second wife actually found the body of him dead, and it was because one of the servants ran to her and was like, we need to ring the bells, because as soon as the king dies, or the ruler dies, they ring the bells and all the people know. The mother was like, no, the second wife was, I'm not having this. She had him executed. She summoned all the lords of the council and said, what we're going to do is, we're going to swear all this, we're going to get all the lords and everything, and we're going to give the crown to Aegon. And a lot of the lords were like, this is not acceptable. We can't betray Viserys like this. Any lord that disagreed was murdered in that room. Then, God, we're tangenting off here. You've got to talk about
real quick, because Rhaenyra was in Dragonstone, she didn't get the chance to jump.
She was in Dragonstone giving birth. And when they went to Aegon II, and said, his mother was like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to take the throne. He actually said no. He said, I will not betray my sister like that. I would never want that to happen to me, so I'm not going to do that to her. And his mother convinced him that you're always going to be a threat to her throne. She will have you and your brothers and sisters murdered. That is what's going to happen. So he panicked and believed all this bullshit and took the throne. It wasn't until 3 days later they finally rang the bells, because in the books it even says that you could smell Viserys' body from the throne room. If you know the schematics of the Red Keep, that is a ridiculously amount of feet for that smell to travel. And when Rhaenys found out her throne got usurped, she literally had a miscarriage due to the anger, and then that kicked off the whole war. But just a little tidbit that Aegon never actually wanted the throne, but his mother, it's crazy to think that, and her mother, who was a Hightower, not even a Targaryen, Viserys married his sister and then married a Hightower for allegiances. One Hightower woman is the reason the Targaryens lost their dragons, and is the reason the Targaryen dynasty was ruined. Because, just to theorize, Rhaegar would have never lost the battle against Robert Baratheon, or there wouldn't even have been a rebellion if they still had dragons. But they didn't. One Hightower woman is the reason the dynasty fell.
Anyway,
damn, what the fuck is a Targaryen?
We got very wound up.
If I have fans half as dedicated as Ali is to Game of Thrones, I will consider myself successful.
The thing is, man, it's just, this is the reason we love doing this show, is we're not forced into it. We like talking about things we're passionate about, and there you go. Game of Thrones isn't even my favorite thing out there, but when I'm passionate about something, I just love talking about it. It's why we started this fucking show.
Me neither. I'm just very passionate about weird medieval shit. I love swords.
Yeah,
don't know if we talked about that. Did we cover that?
Yeah. Did we ever say that before? I don't know. Did we get that on record?
Love swords, but also super quick one. If you guys could have any fucking weapon, like any kind of medieval weapon, what kind of weapon would you imagine yourself going into battle with?
A bastard sword.
Bastard sword? That fucking 6-foot son of a bitch?
No, because a bastard sword is amazing. You can one-hand it, or the reason it's called a bastard sword is it doesn't have a full handle. It's got one handle for one-handing and a little knob, so you can two-hand if you want to. For the way, I'm 6'4", I'm a pretty big guy. And someone police, you should use a great sword. No, I would like to use something that's versatile. So if I need to, I can swing with one hand and, be fencing a little bit. But if the time comes, I can two-hand and put my weight behind it. And for me, a bastard sword is what I would pick, because I have the capability to one-hand or two-hand in the situation it calls for. But that might be the inner black side of me talking, but
Yeah.
I know my own fighting style, I know my own build, and I feel like a bastard sword having the ability to one hand for mobility, or to two hand to really put power behind it is super versatile in a fight.
Yeah. Caleb, what piece of steel are you rocking out here?
If I could, okay, so
Is that a Zweihander?
not logically speaking, a Zweihander. That's like that's it. But there's no way, if I'm thinking logically, I would go in with a two-handed sword. It's just I'm a big dude. I mean, I'm like 6 foot. You know, I'm like 320 pounds. I'm the sizable human being. And I would like to say is Zweihander, but no, I've always had something about if you've ever played For Honor, which is a fantastic game and really,
Oh, I love For Honor.
For Honor's it's great. I mean, I love
For Honor is great.
But I've always had something about that whole chain mace thing. I mean, when the guy.
Star?
Yes, well, I mean the Morning Star is attached to the handle, and I think it might even be you could say it has the chain too. And I've actually seen some where the chain comes off too. So
you're a conch, the conch.
I've always had something about you see the cutscene where the guy he walks up and then he drops the ball off of it and it hits. Oh my gosh, there's something intimidating about a man who can swing around a giant ball of steel.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, think about it. I don't know where I was going with that, but just think about it. No, yeah.
My medieval weapon would 110% be like a double-headed war axe. Because I know you and Ali have already said, like, you're big guys. I'm also a big guy. I used to heave shit around for a living, and I think I could definitely heave around a fucking double-headed war axe or a battle axe. That would just be fucking sick.
Fucking Gimli-looking ass.
You saying that, I'm just going to put this out there right there. I'm just going to put this out there right now. When we get somewhat more sizable with listeners, and
God.
It's me.
We should 100%
me with a
do a
huge
Saving
beard,
Throws calendar,
shirtless with photoshopped abs on. I've done them myself. They look great.
Yeah.
With a fucking double-headed battle axe. Cutting open a can of fucking Monster Energy. That's just where I'm at.
So sick. And that universal, everyone wants to see that.
Exactly. Yeah. It absolutely.
Girls are into Monster Energy.
If you look like Aubrey Plaza or anything like that, call me.
You gonna break my heart? Please contact me.
Or even
if you want to step on my heart and rip my throat out, contact me. Speaking of which, ripping out throats and pulling out hearts, Harry, what would your medieval weapon be?
Trebuchet. No doubt about it. We were talking about this earlier. They're like, everyone was like, "Oh, we're gonna get a trebuchet." I'm like, "Yeah, you guys can go with your swords. You got a war. I'm gonna sit back. I'm gonna have a cup of tea. I'll shoot my trebuchet at the castle, man."
Okay, but again, do you have anything outside of that? Because when I get past the trebuchet, I mean, you got to have something on you.
Caleb, I got my winning smile.
Oh, okay. In the heat of combat, honestly, if I was a medieval double-headed axeman and I got up to the enemy trebuchet and someone just hit me with an award-winning smile, I would reconsider every option. I would be like,
get past the defenses. I give him a little kiss.
See, no, that is a lie, Kingsley. Do you know how I know that? Because if we somehow go and we go back to the time of medievalness, we would be paid to it. We'd be fucking Scottish barbarians. A smile would probably you gotta remember me. You wouldn't have moved to England. You would have still been in Scotland fighting as a pick. A smile would do nothing. Think about that, because you'd be raised and battle bred. A smile probably make you only feel that rage more, and you'd cut them down.
Absolutely.
100%. Mate, I'm 6'4". They're probably using me as a battering ram.
And using him to destroy Harry's trebuchet.
See, now we're talking about barbarians and Scottish and this man, and I want
we would use Ali to hit you. I couldn't help but
picture Toy Story where they used the T-Rex.
Well, okay, you guys get near my trebuchet. I'm jumping in my trebuchet. I'm firing myself across the horizon and midair inventing a parachute. No one can get there.
Sorry. logistics of midair, inventing a whole new system that has never been thought up.
Yeah, dude. Come get me. I dare you. Yeah, dude. Absolutely.
If it was anyone.
Could you imagine trying to go report that to your higher-ups? Like, yeah, we tried to get this guy, the trebuchet. He put himself in his cannon and then fired himself into the forest and then just disappeared.
If it was picked, then it would literally, we report that to a chief and it's like, aye, fucking witches. And that's it.
Fucking witches, dude.
No, so this is how it would go down. Right, lads, you got a report from the battle. Well, aye a day, but you're not going to believe me, mate. So what fucking happened is this wee fucking mad bastard put himself on the trebuchet and he fired himself to fuck. Did he die? That's the weird thing. This weird blanket, like almost like a giant kilt, came out of his back, and he just,
crazy.
like a bird, sailed away. Mad fuck.
That's
witches.
Mad fuck.
Incredible.
The enemy are developing some weird tactics.
Verbatim.
That's how exactly it would go.
shot with
That
a
is
fucking
exactly how it would go.
Oh, incredible.
Someone come up with a semi-intellectual question right now, I beg.
Okay, I have one to get us away from trebuchets. Okay, so I love mythology. I think mythology is awesome, right? Arthurian mythos is such an interesting mythos because it is not like necessarily handed down through a culture. It is more like a story that over time slowly gets mutated by the authors and the people writing it and the people retelling it. New characters come in, new situations come in. Like, it's kind of like a cast that evolves quite slowly over a period of time. Now, is there kind of like, when you approach Arthurian mythos and you're writing a story about Arthurian mythos, is there kind of like a daunting curve or like a wall of like, what do I even include? Like, I know like the very, very popular stuff like Excalibur. Do you start there or do you go like, is there specific stuff that you look at? Like, is it daunting? Like, where do you go with that?
So my first thing was, of course, Excalibur. I mean, everybody and their brother come out of the womb knowing that King Arthur had Excalibur.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but one thing about Arthurian legend that I found really interesting, and to be 100% honest with you, I'm not even totally sure how I came up with the idea. I don't remember the day that I was like, okay, I'm going to write Arthurian legend. I cannot remember what brought me to that decision. But as I started looking into it, and one of the things I even mentioned in the book is that Arthurian legend spans like centuries. They don't have a pinpoint on the dates that they believe could potentially be the real backbone behind Arthurian legend. And I even mentioned in the book that it starts where King Arthur is in a battle in what is, I think it's like 800 AD, but there's also mention of him in like 1300 AD. So when I started writing, I was focusing on one pinpoint. And then when I started doing more research and saw, wait, this could potentially be centuries of information that we don't know about. And side note, they're still not 100% sure that King Arthur is as much myth as it can be. There's a lot of scholars who believe that it is grounded in very legitimate information. So as I was looking at it and saw all these centuries, I was like, you got to have an idea that can cover all of this, because if you don't, you're going to get ripped apart by people who are big fans of Arthurian legend. So I was sitting there thinking, I was like, how am I going to cover what could be possibly centuries of information in the mythology? And that's when the idea of Camelot come into place. And again, spoiler, Camelot lives outside of time that is our own world. The brothers only spend what spans potentially a couple hours inside of Camelot. Then when they go back, 50 years have passed. And that's how you get the difference in how I covered the large amount of time between what could be Arthurian legend in our own timeline.
Super sick. Yeah, because so you kind of came at it with a like, okay, I kind of have to figure out how to explain this glaring thing in Arthurian mythos, and you came at it from the front and just said, first off, gonna solve that problem, gonna figure out
Right.
how to solve that problem, and went straight in. That's super awesome. Love to see it.
And see, also in my book, Arthur and Sir Kay are buried in Castle Uther in the bottom of it, you know. But in Arthurian legend, they're actually buried at what's called Avalon. So I was like, okay, well, you've got to figure out about all this. And then when you look at the fact that you have these dragons, they're not mentioned anywhere in Arthurian legend. I was like, well, maybe there's potential that because you have dragons all over civilization. I mean, and they're in every civilization ever mentioned, especially when it comes to religion. I mean, even the Aztecs had the I think it's the Quetzalcoatl. You know,
Yeah,
the
God of Blood, right? Feathered serpent.
Egyptians, right? Egyptians have his name is Apophis, who's the god of darkness. I mean, every big religion has this whole idea of dragons or serpents or whatever. So I had to figure out a way to explain that, and that's when we get into the idea of the fact that Camelot was a prison for this whole thing that took place that no one knows about. They wrote about it, and there's pictures and there's history depicting it, but there's nothing in present day. So using that idea of leaving information out and hiding information was easy to bring to the forefront as to everything you know about Arthurian legend is a cover up for the fact that Merlin had this glaring mistake that ended up plaguing the world. And I brought into the idea that the Knights of the Round Table, where most people know them as noble, you know, seeking out the Holy Grail, are actually dragon hunters. That was their main purpose for traveling and looking, was to be dragon hunters.
The way you did it as well is because I guess we're already going into how the book works and bigger parts of the book. The way it's described that they get around is it's so sick. They just use like ley lines and travel the world through a port. It's fucking cool, dude. Like
It's so awesome.
Look, sell me a book about a medieval strike force that hunts dragons using magic portals. I'm in. Throw in
so sick.
Arthurian legend. I'm doubling. It's such a cool concept.
Going off of like that one question I asked like a while back, favorite Knight of the Round Table, go.
Okay, see, I'm biased because I wrote about 3 of them. That's
and let's
true.
just say, and let's just say, you can't say King Arthur because by technicality, he was a Knight of the Round Table.
I don't know if okay, so for me, because I know what my favorite character in my own book is, based off my favorite character in my book and how I've written him, Caradoc is by far my favorite because of how I've written him. I can't really say as far as the official account of the Knights of the Round Table.
I also go for Caradoc, literally just because of the way Caleb has written him.
Okay. Okay. Well, I will say something different. I have two, and I actually can't pick between them. Lancelot and Gawain. I love Gawain. Lancelot, I just like his character. Like, a lot of people usually say, I know, if I highly doubt it, Brendan Lee Mulligan, he'll probably be like, fuck you picking Lancelot, that's everyone's favourite. But because he talked a little bit on this himself, but I love Gawain and Lancelot. They're my two, and the reason I'm saying two names is a bit of a cheat, but it's because I actually can't pick between them. I love Gawain and Lancelot so much.
I have to go with Gawain. I mean, Gawain and the Green Knight. It's like probably one of my favorite Arthurian stories, and he's just an all round good guy, right? Gawain's just a good guy, and like I love that.
Exactly,
Like,
man.
okay, I'm probably paraphrasing here, but like I love in the stories. It's like, and that's Gawain. He's just a good guy. Like it's just like he's just a fun guy to be around. No, yeah, I just love Gawain. He's my favorite.
Yeah, and I also love as he was known as the Maiden's Knight, the defender of women. I love Gawain, man. Gawain was a great guy. Lancelot was a ladies' man, and Gawain was just an all-around good vibe, dude. Good vibes from Gawain.
Well, see, the issue I had when I started writing was I couldn't write about characters that were extremely well known. On top of the fact, when you get into writing about stuff that already exists, you know, the myth has already exists, the characters already exist. as a writer, you have to look into what's called the public domain, and you have to see if those characters are free to use. And so when I looked into the public domain, I didn't see certain characters. King Arthur's there. I mean, he's there in spades. I believe Lancelot is there, and I don't think Gawain is there. I'm not 100% sure. But I didn't want to write about characters that were already really well established in Arthurian legend. So I stayed away from Lancelot for the time being. Spoiler, there might be something later. But
spoiler alert, that's the name of this episode. We spoil everything for you.
there might be something later. But I wanted to choose characters that nobody really knew much about, and that kind of brings into like Leo de Grance. Leo de Grance, he is called King Leo de Grance, and so I had to figure out a reason in my mythos as to why he's called King Leo de Grance. And if you remember from the book, it's because he's so bullheaded. He doesn't wear any armor, and Caradoc calls him that as a joke because he's an idiot.
It's that insult because they call him king because he believes himself to be so mighty and invincible.
And he even tells him, you're going to get your ass charred one day because you don't wear any armor.
He's like, why do you not go into battle without armor? And I can't remember exactly what it is he says, but it's something along the lines of, I need to be able to move, and I need to show this off, when he like references his codpiece or something like that.
Yes, I wear my metal unders.
Yeah, that's it. I wear my metal unders.
Oh, so sick.
Leo de Grance is brilliant, and the fact that he's called king and he hates it, even better.
If I could pose one last question, it would be, how did you find yourself writing a book? Where did you start your writing? As someone who's been working on a book myself for a couple of years, and when we spoke last time, because one nice thing about is this to our listeners is we don't really know Caleb. We both share a love for a game called Ark, and I saw him post about his book on the Ark page, and I went to message him and be like, I'd love to get him and talk to him. So we're not like buddy. Like, we don't know him like I know Harry and Kingsley. So which I think makes it as awesome for having him on here and shooting the shit with him. I think it's just awesome. But last time we spoke, the podcast that will only live in our brains because we've lost it. Was we basically touched on how this book you pretty much done in a year. Now, someone myself has been working on a book for a couple years now, but that's because I am horrible for getting sidetracked, and I'll start doing something else, and then maybe I'll work on 15 other things. I personally started from an RP. I had never RP'd before, and it started from a game called Conan Exiles on the Xbox, and it's on other platforms as well, but I had joined the server because I was looking for a server I could actually play with people, and the one rule was you had to RP to be in the server. And that led to me starting my own Ark RP server, and then that led to me completely making my own world lore version of Game of Thrones Dance of Dragons. Completely, the whole idea was mine. I didn't want to do what George R. R. Martin done, because like you, I wanted to do my own story. The only canon characters I kept was Viserys, because I didn't want to be like, because I put way too much into this RP. I was like, how do I replace Viserys with? So I kept Viserys, but I ended up editing the bloodline. I put in new brothers and new sisters. I edited the whole world, and that's where writing came from for me. Was all from literal just writing in text-based RP. That's where my writing came from. So is it similar for you, or how did you go from? Like, where's the in between? I'm sure it wasn't just woke up one day and wrote a book. Did you start writing when you were? Was it something you done when you were younger, like a kid, or is it something that kind of similar to me transpired from loving RP and being creative to then moving on to write your own book?
So it's kind of a combination of everything you just said. When I was very small, probably around middle school, I carried around a notebook of about 300 loose leaf pages, handwritten, of my very first story. I still have it. Mind you, if I ever published it, it would be complete plagiarism of X-Men, because that's what I was into at the time. And with all the power Disney has, I'll probably end up in a hole somewhere. But
fucking assassinate you.
Yes, with ease.
So funny. Oh my god, so funny.
But it evolved from that, and I have found a way to take that story and make it legitimate. And I haven't decided if I'll ever do anything with it, but I might one day. But it evolved from that, and coincidentally, I was actually in RPs too, big time actually. I was in high school. I was in a Halo clan that was based on Star Wars, and we had an RP inside on our website. And to be honest, I was a Miralukan, and I don't know if you know a whole lot about Star Wars, but Miralukans are born blind, and they are so in tune with the Force. That's what they use to see. So the Force kind of works like almost like a thermal kind of vision type thing. And my character was my name was Count Heresy, and I was a Miralukan Sith, and so I wrote that RP, and then RP kind of moved into I wrote a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh fan fiction, and there's a couple. I think only done a few of those, and they're actually on Wattpad. But throughout everything, I've always wanted to write. I guess that was kind of the dream I always wanted for myself. And originally, when I was going through school, I was going to be a physical therapy assistant. And when I almost had my appendix burst and I ended up missing registration, and who was my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, she's like, "Do you really want to do this? What do you really want to do for the rest of your life?" And so I laid there in that hospital bed, and I was like, I want to write video games. I want to create the worlds. I want to create the characters, and then I want to be able to play those characters in my hand. And so we went from that to video game design. And the job I was working, I didn't have enough time to put into the program Maya, which is what is used kind of mainstream for developing stuff like that. So we found out you don't have to have that degree to write scripts for video games. You have to have a creative writing degree. So I switched majors into creative writing, which is what I'm in now. And I started my very first Scourge, which I talked about earlier. That idea came from the fact that we were at our house, and I was like, I want to write something, but I don't know what to write. So we took a piece of paper and we wrote down a bunch of stuff. We wrote down male, female. We wrote down a bunch of settings, medieval, futuristic. We wrote down a bunch of things like demonic possession, angelic possession, things like, just a whole list of stuff. We cut up into these tiny little pieces of paper and we threw them in a bucket. And I picked 4 of them, and I ended up picking past, pirate, angelic possession, and I can't remember what the 4th one was. But those 4 words or those 4 terms is what inspired that first book. And from that point, the ideas for everything else, I was like, you know what, I can do this, because then I learned about independent publishing and about publishing on Amazon and things like that. And I was like, I can do this. This is what I want to do. I want to create worlds, because my number one goal is to please people. I want to be that entertainer. And that's what led to what I am now, which is a published author.
So sick, dude. That's so awesome. This is a great journey.
Phenomenal to just like have such a love for writing from such a young age, and then have that kind of like moment where everything in your life just pauses, where you're about to commit to a full career, and then you're like, would this actually make me happy? But it's good to see now, like, you've come out with your first book. It's on Amazon, and it's a good book, and I hope that like inspires you to keep pushing down this line. Because I'd love to see you accomplish what you want to.
Well, we're already working on the second one. I'm working through edits now, and we're hoping the second one comes out in May, and then we're going to try to push for the third one to come out in November-ish. And potentially we have anywhere from 5 to what could end up being 12 books planned, depending on how things go for this series.
Oh, so sick. I truly cannot wait. Truly cannot wait.
No, neither can I. Caleb, before we kind of wrap things up, are there any authors you would recommend to our audience, or even to us to read? Just add that little bit of spice to your life.
Oh, totally. So as far as, admittedly, I don't read as much as I should. I spend a lot of my time writing and editing and video gaming. But I love Chris Paolini and his Inheritance saga. It's great books if you haven't read Aragon and all that. I've got some independent author friends who write good. Kevin Potter writes the Overlord series. And it's about Kevin Potter's a big dragon epic fantasy guy too, and his stuff's really good. If you pick up nothing else from me, I encourage everyone everywhere to read my favorite book of all time, which is The Count of Monte Cristo. If you don't read a book in your life, you need to read The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers. Alexander Dumas is potentially the greatest artist of all time, the greatest author of all time. If I could take just a piece of the way he could write and bring it forward, I would be exceptionally happy with myself. But The Count of Monte Cristo is something every person should read. I have the tome. I have the 1,000+ pages that I used to read once a year, but I don't read it anymore, mainly because the difference in time periods in which they write, it can affect my writing a little bit, and no one wants to read that type of writing anymore. And I actually had to focus on that, because when I first started writing, I wrote in that kind of time period style, and I had to get away from that. And it took me a long time to figure out how to write for what readers want now. But definitely 100%, anything written by Alexander Dumas is a masterpiece.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
So sick. So
Well,
awesome.
Caleb, it's been so lovely having you on for the first time ever.
Second time.
Psych.
Yeah. Never done this before.
Caleb, where can our audience find you online? Where can they buy this lovely book? Where can they read more of your fantastic writing?
Yeah, great. So you can find me on Facebook. I have a fan page, which is Caleb N. Kelly author. And that's one thing about me. I am Caleb N. Kelly. There are a lot of other Caleb Kellys online. I'm specifically Caleb N. Kelly. And my website is actually calebnkelly.com. And there you can actually, if you subscribe to my newsletter, you can actually get my Silence of the Gods series, which is a short story prequel about an Egyptian assassin who has been stolen from his original life to kill the gods, the Greek gods, in order to release the Egyptian gods from their astral prison. And so you can pick, if you subscribe to the newsletter, you get all three of those for free. I am currently working on the Charge of the Gods series, which is the forefront to that prequel. And I'm hoping to get the first one of it out hopefully next year at some point. And of course, you can find me on Amazon, Camelots Reckoning. I think I'm the first thing to come up. The book is there. You can get it on Kindle Unlimited for free. You can also get it an ebook for $3.99, and you can order a paperback for $12. Or if you message me, you can get a signed copy for $13. So.
And folks,
I'm gonna get that
do
signed
urge you
copy.
to splash that little bit of cash. It's always nice to feel a book in your hands.
Oh yeah,
I read this thing on
So
Kindle.
true.
The first full book I've read on a Kindle, which has changed my experience.
And for independent authors, ebooks is a massive commerce. We don't tend to. There's a lot of independent authors I know who don't even go the extra mile to make their books available in paperback. But me personally, I can read on my phone or on a Kindle, but I love that feel. I love the feel of the pages. That to me is the ultimate experience. So when we originally sat down to do this, I was like, we're going to fork out the extra money to make this available in paperback. And that has actually been my biggest success from people who I haven't spoken to in 15 years, who come out and say, look, I want a paperback. I want your name in it. And I sign every book that's ordered through me with a quill pen, to match my Iron Scribe mantra.
That is fantastic. I also think I will be buying a book through your website as well, just for the point is we all have it on ebook here. We had to read it for this interview, and God, I'm so glad we did. But I am actually wanting to start my own book collection, and I can now feel my age going up, as I, as a kid, hated reading. I loved comic books, I loved manga, despised books.
You old man.
Oh no, am I the old guy
here?
here?
Years of 24,
Yeah.
turning 25. I know. Oh man, I am a 50-year-old in the body of a 24-year-old man. But
That
I
would
really want
be
to start a
amazing.
book collection. I think I will add your book to the first of my book collections that is signed. I have the what you call them? I think they're called the Dragon Tale, the old Wizards of the Coast Dragon books. I can't remember what they're called. shit, Dragon Song, whatever it is.
Dragonology?
Can't remember what they're called now. It's really pissing me off. They're like, there's Dragon something. There's probably people listening going, "It's this, you idiot!" But no, it's Dragon something. There's a massive book series
my
by Wizards. Like
fucking
they
God.
even wrote some D&D modules. Give me a sec.
Thank you.
Dragonlance.
This is meant to be a quick. Dragonlance! Jesus, it's going to be a quick sign off and I'm talking forever. I have the Dragonlance books, but no, I want to start a proper book collection and I want to have them signed. So I think the first book of that collection will be Camelots Reckoning from the amazing author and guest, Caleb N. Kelly. I appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much. And I remember last time we spoke, you said you got a
Yeah,
book
we actually the cover's
so
being
we'll
worked
have you on
on
again
as
then,
we
so you can
speak.
talk
I
about
talked
the
to my
book that's
cover
coming out.
artist just yesterday. They're currently working on it, and we hope to do a reveal either next month or the following month. And it's either going to be May or the beginning of June, depending on how things go with as far as my own work schedule and my editor. Or I'm gonna call her an editor. She doesn't call herself an editor, but she's fantastic. But so that's kind of what I'm looking at, to push 2 books every year from here on out.
Oh,
I mean,
so
reading's
good.
like a
Look
drug,
forward.
so you got to keep people
Yeah.
addicted.
If you could do that, that would be
It
fab.
fully is, man.
Oh, that's our whole outlook for watching videos on YouTube during this pandemic. Binging videos like a drug right now. That's why we're going to be pushing out a number of shows soon, not just the podcast. Little tease there for our listeners.
A sneaky little tease. And with that sneaky little tease, folks, we've been Saving Throws. You know us. You've listened to us a couple of times now. You can find us online. You can find us on Instagram at Saving Throws Insta. You can find us on Twitter at our Twitter handle is
Throws Saving.
Throws Saving. Fantastic. You can find us on Facebook at Saving Throws. You can find us on YouTube at Saving Throws. You can even find us on SoundCloud at Saving Throws. And remember, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Otherwise, author Caleb N. Kelly will write you out of existence. See you next time.